Hello, and thank you for joining me today. In this webinar, I'm going to provide you with an overview of Read Naturally Live Español, a component of Read Live. The Read Live platform is a set of research-based reading programs effective for intervention and supplemental support. Our company, Read Naturally, was first created well over 30 years ago, and the programs have evolved through several formats, the latest being found in Read Live. Read Live is now used in thousands of schools around the world. Read Live allows teachers to easily differentiate instruction and provide targeted support, essential for RTI and MTSS models. Read Live is a cloud-based program, so it can be used anywhere, in the classroom or for remote learning. Again, Read Live is the name of the platform or suite of programs, so you can think of it as a sort of umbrella term. The four programs included in Read Live are Read Naturally Live, Word Warm-Ups Live, 1 Minute Reader Live, and Read Naturally Live Español. Every purchased Read Live seat includes all of these programs, and teachers can decide which to assign to their students. This table just provides a quick overview of the four programs. Read Naturally Live is our flagship fluency intervention that also supports phonics, vocabulary, and comprehension. Word Warm-Ups Live is a separate phonics intervention. Many students work in Word Warm-Ups Live for phonics support, and it can be paired with Read Naturally Live for fluency intervention. 1 Minute Reader Live is our structured independent reading program that offers supported reading practice. This is a supplemental program, not an intervention. The teacher is not required for the students to be able to complete any steps. And that brings us to Read Naturally Live Español, which is the focus of our webinar today. It is based off of Read Naturally Live, but has a few differences, the main one being, of course, that it is presented entirely in Spanish. You can always check our website for webinars and more information on these first three programs, but for now, let's dive into Read Naturally Live Español. Read Naturally Live Español focuses on fluency and also supports vocabulary and comprehension. Students work through audio-supported steps to read each story accurately and fluently, and then demonstrate understanding by answering comprehension questions. Read Naturally Live Español is intended to help students develop Spanish language literacy skills, which is useful in a variety of contexts. For example, it's beneficial for English learners to develop at least some reading skills in their primary language, in this case, Spanish, before working on reading in their target language, English. It's also very impactful to support biliteracy skills for students who are bilingual or multilingual, which could mean having these students work in both Read Naturally Live as well as Read Naturally Live Español. Lastly, it may be used in world language classrooms with students who are learning Spanish as an additional language, as literacy and language skills are reciprocal. So as I mentioned before, Read Naturally Live Español focuses on fluency and also supports vocabulary and comprehension. Please keep in mind that Read Naturally Live Español is not intended to cover phonemic awareness or phonics and should be used after or in tandem with another program if students have needs in those areas. So fluency is the main focus of Read Naturally Live Español. So what is it and why is it so important? Well, fluency is a combination of appropriate rate, accuracy, and expression. I want to clarify that the rate component is not speed reading, but rather the student's ability to read like they speak. And it should be automatic. When students are no longer struggling so much just to read the words, their cognitive load is freed up to be able to focus on understanding them instead. This idea is called the automaticity theory, and it was put forth by Dr. S.J. Samuels in the 1970s. And we can see that there's evidence to support the correlation between oral reading fluency and comprehension. To interpret this type of correlation data, a perfect match would be 1.0. So as you can see, these three comprehension-related measures are all above 0.6, which indicates there is a strong correlation. But oral reading fluency is actually the strongest, and by far, with a 0.91 correlation. And I really want to demonstrate for you why that is. So if you would please take a moment to read the first couple of lines on this screen aloud. So that's pretty easy, right? Now this time, don't read the words, but instead name the colors of the words. If you found that round to be a little more difficult than the first, it's because you're an automatic reader. So you can't stop reading the words, even when you make a concerted effort not to read them. And since you're automatic readers, you can put all your mental energy into meaning. And that's what we want for our students. Now, many students can achieve this without too much extra effort or without intervention, but for many other students, that's not the case. And these struggles that you see listed on the screen can really be exacerbated when a student is trying to juggle their language and literacy development in multiple languages. And so that's just another reason why it is so beneficial, whenever possible, for a student to develop general literacy skills and find some success in reading in their home or primary language first before shifting the focus to the target or an additional language. So, if our goal is to support our students in becoming fluent readers in Spanish who can comprehend what they read, what should we do? Well, we should have them practice. We need to increase their time spent reading. But not all time spent reading is created equal. Independent or silent reading, for example, does have a time and place, but as research analyzed by the National Reading Panel suggests, it is not the most effective way to improve reading achievement. Struggling readers don't have support, so they may just pretend to read during this time. Additionally, it's just not the deepest or most impactful way to practice. There's no auditory or physical engagement to reinforce how words should sound and how they should feel when spoken aloud. On top of that, even if at-risk students do read during silent reading time, it makes sense that they would read more slowly than the other students. So to give you an example of the impact that has, a proficient reader who reads 200 words per minute silently could read 2,000 words in 10 minutes. In the same 10 minutes, an at-risk student who reads only 50 words per minute would read only 500 words. So consider the effect that that disparity in number of words has over the course of a year. So the struggling reader is just going to continue to fall further and further behind. So instead of simply releasing students to read silently, the National Reading Panel has concluded that a more effective course of action is for us to explicitly teach developing readers how to read fluently and to support them step by step. And we have research-proven strategies for doing that. So these three strategies, teacher modeling, repeated reading, and progress monitoring, make up the Read Naturally strategy. And this is the strategy that is implemented throughout our programs, including Read Naturally Live Español. So the process begins with getting a baseline for progress monitoring purposes. So the student does a cold timing where they read for 1 minute to get their initial words correct per minute score. Then we have the teacher modeling, where the student reads along with an audio recording of the story, sub-vocalizing with the narration so they can experience hearing, seeing, and saying the words all at the same time. Next, the student reads repeatedly, independently, and aloud before ultimately doing a hot timing reading for the teacher for a minute again to see how much their words correct per minute score has improved. So this is the basic outline of the process through the lens of those research-proven strategies. In a bit, I'll show you the full process with a quick tour of the program. But this combination of these elements is ultimately what leads to dramatic results for developing and struggling readers. So the Read Naturally strategy was developed by our founder, Candace Einat, in the late 80s, early 90s, when she was working as a special education teacher in the Minneapolis public schools. She collected data with her students in 2 phases. In phase 1, she applied the strategy with a group of special education students and saw an average weekly gain of 2.35 words correct per minute, compared to the Title I group that made an average weekly gain of 1.23 words correct per minute. And the Title I students were also receiving quality instruction, just without the Read Naturally strategy. And that 1.23 average gain was in alignment with what would have been expected for those students, according to the Hasbrook and Tyndall norms. So that 2.35 average gain really exceeded expectations. Then in phase 2, she applied the strategy with a group of Title I students and saw significant progress with them as well, with the weekly average gain being 2.15 words correct per minute. Since then, there have been formal studies proving the strategy's effectiveness, not just for fluency, but also for comprehension. So again, the Read Naturally strategy is the core of our programs, which includes Read Naturally Live Español. But now let's go over the details about what you and your students get specifically with this program, Read Naturally Live Español. Now, there are many benefits for the students. So they're going to develop fluency in Spanish by reading short nonfiction passages. The audio support helps students increase accuracy and improve their expression. The passages are vocabulary rich and knowledge building, and the program includes steps and features that also support students' vocabulary and comprehension development. Students are working mostly independently at their own level and pace. And of course, as the student experiences success, their attitude toward reading and their confidence improve over time. So there are 10 levels of content in Read Naturally Live Español, levels 1.0 through 5.6. All the content and instructions for the students are in Spanish, but the student also does have access to the instructions in English, which is useful especially for primarily English-speaking students who are learning Spanish as an additional language. The teacher menu is in English, and when the teacher is sitting with a student to review their work, they can toggle between Spanish or English, and I'll show you how to do that when we go through the program demonstration. The program is appropriate for students whose reading skills are between 1st and 5th grade reading levels in Spanish. The intervention range includes beginning readers through adults who need to work on these skills. So, as I mentioned before, Read Naturally Live Español is appropriate in a variety of scenarios. To see students make progress, they should work in Read Naturally Live Español in 30 to 45-minute sessions, 3 to 5 times a week. As I mentioned before, Read Naturally Live Español is based on Read Naturally Live, but they do have some differences that go beyond the language, of course. So they have a different number of levels. Read Naturally Live has the supplemental Spanish read-along, whereas Read Naturally Live has a supplemental English read-along, etc. Same thing for the reports. So if you have Spanish-speaking English learners working in the sequenced series in Read Naturally Live, the English program, they could do a supplemental Spanish read-along in levels 1.0 through 5.6 to support their comprehension. So that extra support is not available in these other series at this time. But the sequence series comprises the basic curriculum, and that's the series that we have here in Read Naturally Live, and that's also the series we have in Read Naturally Live Español. So it's appropriate for any developing or struggling reader. Each level has 24 stories. There's a level at almost every half year. And the reason for this is that struggling readers rarely make full year leaps as they progress. So the intent is that a student will work at one level long enough to be proficient there, which will likely take about 12 to 24 stories. And then the teacher will assign the student to the next level, which is typically only a half-year increase in difficulty. This is just an example of how the sequence series in the English program, Read Naturally Live, has that supplemental Spanish read-along available for many of those sequence levels. And the same is true in Read Naturally Live Español with a supplemental English read-along. So if a teacher chooses to enable this support for a student, the student would read along with the Spanish translation of the story before reading along with the English version of the story, and vice versa in Read Naturally Live Español. And this just helps support their comprehension and background knowledge before they get into practicing in their target language. So again, those supplemental English read-alongs are available for all the levels in Read Naturally Live Español, but the supplemental Spanish read-along is only available through level 5.6 in the Read Naturally Live sequence series, so in the English program. And then this is just a table showing those 10 sequence levels available in Read Naturally Live Español. And here's an example of that English supplemental read-along for a Spanish story from Read Naturally Live Español. So Read Naturally Live Español tends to work best in a resource room or a reading lab, but can be used in a variety of contexts. A teacher-to-student ratio of 1 to 8 is recommended. If you are working with a larger number of students, consider using parents, volunteers, or paraprofessionals to assist. If you're using the program in a world language context with secondary level students, you might consider having heritage speakers or more advanced students help out with the more beginner level students. In terms of scheduling, it's best to set up sessions at least 3 times a week, preferably 5, in blocks of at least 30 to 45 minutes. So, of course, the more practice your students get, the more quickly they'll improve. So placement of individual students within Read Naturally Live Español is going to involve choosing an appropriate level of material and a story goal for each student. Now, Read Naturally Live Español only has that sequence series. It does not have the phonics or idiom series, so there's no need to make a choice there. So to guide your students in choosing the level and goal, you can visit our Read Live help page from the readnaturally.com website, which has links down here under Read Naturally Live Español and job aids to a placement overview, which is great. If you already have fluency data, this is just a quick overview that can help you find a good starting point. It also has this placement packet draft, which has both instructions and passages for conducting placement and also for checking initial placement. So this packet is only called a draft because we're hoping to hear from some more teachers about their experiences using it, so we can make sure it is as effective as possible. So please do reach out with any feedback as you use this resource. Now, after your students are placed, it's very important for you to invest some time upfront to teach students what is expected of them. So this includes teaching them the order of the steps, what they must do for each step, how to use the program, the criteria for passing a story, and what your expectations are for student performance. So you could choose to teach them the steps yourself, or you can take advantage of the student training videos that are available on our website. So the videos for Read Naturally Live Español are presented in Spanish, but if you have multilingual students who are more advanced in English, you could choose to have them watch the Read Naturally Live videos, which are in English instead, since the steps for those programs are very nearly the same. This poster shows the steps that students work through for each exercise in Read Naturally Live Español. This is also available on that Read Live help page, and it can be useful to print out for students to just have for orienting purposes as they're starting to learn how to use the program. So now I'll switch over to my Read Live account for a brief demonstration of Read Naturally Live Español. So I'm going to come here to the readlive.readnaturally.com page, and I'm going to log in as a staff member. And here you'll see that we have 2 options. We can either go to this orientation and resources page or go to the home page. From this orientation and resources page, it just has an overview with some instructions for getting started. If we go to the home page instead, you'll see the tiles with all these bullets explaining what actions you can do at each tile. And you'll notice also this menu at the left has the same options over here for navigation as well. For student administration, if you have single sign up for Clever, ClassLink, or Google, your administrator may set students up this way. Today, I'm just going to show you how to set up individual students from this student setup page. So I'm going to come here. You can see the students that I already have registered. I'm going to come up here to the left and click Add Student. And I'll enter their name, their name, and their grade. And if you have their school, they should have a unique student ID. So every student's user ID should be different. And then their password, the only requirements are that it has 3 characters. So, and all students could have the same password or passwords that they use for other programs that they're familiar with. You're going to assign the student a license. You're going to select a lead teacher for the student. And then down here, you're going to select which programs that you want them to have access to. So in this case, we want them to have access to Read Naturally Live Espanol. It's not turned on by default, so we're going to check this box. And in this case, I might consider that I'm having my students work in a dual program, so we're going to have access to Read Naturally Live and Read Naturally Live Espanol, but we don't need this independent program, so I'm going to uncheck that box. And you can just adjust these settings as is appropriate for your situation. And then from here, you can either click Save and Add Another or Save and Close. So you can see that my new student shows up here with all of my other students in this list. I'm going to come back to the home page now and direct you to this student activity tile. So this is where you're going to spend most of your time. You can see all of your students in a list here, and when you click to open, you can see all the programs that they're assigned to and information for each of those programs. So you can see I just added tests here, and you can see that since I added Read Naturally Live Espanol, it's given her a default assignment of level 1.0 and a story goal of 50 words correct per minute. Of course, it's very unlikely that that's where your student's going to start. So that's where I would use either that placement overview or the placement packet draft to choose a new assignment. So once I've gone through that placement packet with the student, I'm going to come here and I can click this little icon over here to change their level and story goal. And you can save and close. So now Tess is ready to start working at level 3.0 instead with a story goal of 105 words correct per minute. And that is the assignment that I determined based on going through that placement packet with her. So I'm just going to quickly direct your attention. We've got a couple of important features up here. So you can see here I have choose students to view. This is just a way when you've got a lot of students here. You might want to filter and search. You could filter by their name, school, grades, lead teacher. You might also want to choose to filter by which program. So I'm going to choose to only view students, for example, who have Read Naturally Live Espanol. And you can see that I have these 2 students here with access. And then to get rid of that filter, I can just click X on that search criteria. Also up here, we have this application specific actions button, and you'll see that for each program, we have a few different buttons for things that we can do. So we might print out stories. We could add applications in bulk, see some reports. So there's some good options over here for each of the programs to explore more on your own time. Lastly, on this page, I just want to show you that we can access the students' reports. So you can quickly see from your teacher module if you want to see their fluency graph or their comprehension graph or any of their story details. Also from this page, you can see that here was our student assignment. So we can change the assignment from this icon. Way over here with this gear icon, we can change the story options. So if I click here, I'll see all of these different options for our stories. And here's where I might choose if I have a multilingual student, who's maybe more proficient in English, but they're learning Spanish as a target language, I might choose to turn on this English read along for my students. So when they get to the read along step, they're going to have the English read along before doing the Spanish read along in this case. I can also choose to turn steps on or off. and change some numbered of required exercises for some of the activities. And then if I change these, I would save and close here. So now we're going to get into the program. So I am going to show you what it looks like from the student side. So I'm going to log in here as a student now. And then I'm going to choose Read Naturally Live, Español.
Por favor, seleccione una lectura.
So you can hear that there is automatic Spanish instructions that play at the start of the page. Again, if you have a student who's more proficient in English, you might have them click on this button in the bottom left corner.
Please select a story.
So that they can hear any of those same instructions in English for them if they get stuck. Up here, you'll notice that we have this counter for how many stories they've completed so far. You can see the number aligns with the number of stories that have these stars on them and are grayed out. So those are the stories that the student has already completed. Up here, you can see the student's level and goal, and you can also click on this tab down to see them. So some of these things are available on any of the student-facing pages. We're going to go ahead and select a story to read.
El Correcaminos.
¿Listo?
It's helpful for the students to have some of this choice that supports their engagement and motivation with the program. So they get to choose the stories in whatever order they prefer. They're going to click yes, they're ready to start.
Haga clic en cada palabra clave para aprender la palabra y lo que significa.
So the student's going to come to this page and click on all the keywords.
Ágil significa capaz de moverse con facilidad, rapidez o elegancia. Los gatos suelen ser muy ágiles. Son capaces de trepar a los árboles y correr por las vallas.
I'm going to mute the site so I can talk over the audio here. So as the student clicks each word, you'll notice that they all are going to have a definition. Some of them are also going to have an image, if it's a word that makes sense to have an image for. And then many of them also include a sample sentence with that word. You'll notice that as the student's clicking on these, there's no option for the student to click out of this. So they do have to go through each of these words before being able to move on. You'll notice that as I complete each of these words, these stars are filling in yellow. That means I've completed that word. And this next button in the bottom right corner is not going to be enabled until you'll see with this last word, that yellow star gets filled in and I've completed the requirements for this page.
En siguiente para continuar.
So if a student this button is disabled and the student is not sure why they can't move on, they can click this requirements button down here, this star in the bottom right corner of the screen, and it will tell them what they need to do to be able to move on. They could also click to here.
Haga clic en una palabra otra vez o haga clic en siguiente para continuar.
The instructions again, either in Spanish or in English.
Mire el título de la lectura, palabras clave. Y la imagen. Escriba una predicción sobre la lectura. A continuación, haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
So this is a before reading strategy to support comprehension to do this prediction step. If your students are struggling with keyboarding or you would rather increase their time spent actually reading, you might consider turning off this step. You can do that again in the story options page. You can do that from the teacher module as I showed you before, or you can also do it if you click this icon up here for the teacher with this little apple and you log in with your teacher credentials. You can also change these story options here. So if I wanted to turn off the prediction or the keywords or any other steps or make adjustments here, I could do it from this teacher menu.
Mire el título de la lectura, palabras clave, y la juegue Wordtastic mientras espera a su profesor. Haga clic en la mejor respuesta para marcar puntos. Haga clic en las palabras que no sabe para escucharlas.
So you can see a couple things have changed on this page. We have a red bar at the top and the bottom of the screen. Anytime you see that as you're walking around working with your students, you know that that student is ready to work with you. So you're always looking as you're walking around your resource room or your reading lab, you're looking for any students that have this red on their screen because that means they need your support. But if you are working with another student at the time, that's absolutely okay because the students are not going to be idle as they're waiting. They can play this wordtastic game. And so they can click on any of these words
Grande.
to hear them read. When they get a question correct, they hear that feedback, that audio feedback. When they get an answer wrong, they'll hear a different audio sound to indicate that. Their points accumulate in the bottom corner of this. These are just for the one story that they're completing. Notice sometimes this is going to be a synonym, sometimes it'll be an antonym. So sometimes it's good to point that out to the students if they're struggling sometimes on those antonym questions, that's the opposite meaning. When you are ready to come conduct the students' cold timing, so that's what they are needing you here for this step, you're going to click on this yellow button at the top of the page. Ultimately, you could choose to have the students do this step independently, which would mean that they don't wait for you when they get to this cold timing step. But it is ideal for you to sit with them and at a minimum sit with them for the first several stories as they're learning the program and learning how to hold themselves accountable. So you're going to log in with your teacher credentials.
Haga clic en Iniciar y comience a leer. Haga clic en las palabras que no sabe para escucharlas. Haga clic en Terminado si termina de leer antes de que suene la campana.
So you'll notice there's a little reading guide toggle over here. That's this yellow bar. If that's distracting to the students, you could have them turn it off, but it's useful for a lot of students to have that tracking feature. When the student is ready to read, you're going to either have them click or you'll click this start button when you hear them start to read. And then they're just going to do their best reading, again, at the best rate they can with accuracy and expression. And anytime they stop, stumble, or skip a word, you're either going to have them click it themselves or you're going to click it for them, and that's going to track their errors.
Cascabel.
And it's going to read it out loud for them. So if they're struggling with a word, you can have them click it.
Delgado.
And the program is going to keep track of these words as words that are missed. It's also going to keep track of these words in a record for you to see later so that you can get a sense of all the words that your students are particularly struggling with. So they're just reading for you for 1 minute. You're not keeping track in your head of the number of errors at this step. You're just clicking on each word that the student misses. And we're just waiting to hear that bell sound that a minute is up, and at which time we will click on the last word that the student read.
Haga clic en la última palabra que leyó cuando sonó la campana.
So
Haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
here's the last word that the student read. So we clicked on it. You can see that it's in gray now. And we can see over here that our score is recorded in this box over here to the right. We can compare that again if we click down on this level and score tab against their goal. So they're starting at 91 when we click next over here.
Mire cuántas palabras leyó correctamente por minuto. Haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
The student gets to see how they did on their first attempt. And again, this goal is for the goal score at the end of the process over here. So you can remind the students that they're not expected to get this goal line at their first attempt. That's how they're doing right at the beginning and how far they have to go before they get their goal and the pass step at the end of the process. So
Haga clic en Iniciar para leer juntos. O haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
the first step here is this read along. Now, if I had that English supplemental read along enabled, they would first have one chance to listen to the story read in English before moving on to the Spanish. You'll notice there are some blue words on the screen. These are all our vocabulary words. The student can click on each of these words.
Esquivar. Esquivar significa evitar algo al moverse rápidamente.
To learn about them before starting the read along, especially in cases where you have multilingual students. It can be helpful. Sometimes teachers have their students click on each of these blue words before starting the process of practicing reading. So typically on this step, our default requirement is to have the students go through it 3 times, and you would notice 3 empty stars over here under the image. I have my settings set to 0 required read-alongs today for the sake of time, but that's the default setting. So students would have to complete that 3 times before moving on, and this next button would be desactivated. I'll just show you what the read-along sounds like.
Para muchos animales en el sudoeste americano, la serpiente de cascabel es una grave amenaza. Pero esta serpiente...
Haga clic en Iniciar para leer juntos de nuevo.
So as the student is completing this read-along, it is very important, again, that they are sub-vocalizing. So they should be reading out loud with the narrator so that they can see, hear, and say the words all at the same time.
Haga clic en Iniciar y comience a leer.
So now the student is getting to the independent, that repeated reading practice step. So they're just going to practice reading to the best of their ability. Again, the default setting for this step is 3 required practices. And so typically they're either going to have to read at least 3 times or until they reach their goal. So if they practice 3 times but they don't reach their story goal, they're going to have to continue practicing until they do. For the purposes of saving time, I have this set just to 1. So we're just going to conduct 1 practice timing here, and you'll see that the student can see what their score was over here to the right in this cold timing first attempt line. And then when they continue practicing, their scores are going to show up here. So as they're doing their practices, they can kind of monitor how they're improving, and that is very motivating for the students. We're just going to listen again for that bell to sound that 1 minute is up.
Ha alcanzado su meta. Ha terminado todas sus prácticas. Haga clic en Iniciar para practicar de nuevo o haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
Has reached their goal, so they'll be able to continue after this 1 practice. Again, the typical requirement is to have 3, and they can see how much they gained from their first timing.
Haga clic en la mejor respuesta y luego haga clic en Siguiente.
After they complete the practices, they're going to move on to the quiz. So they're going to come and answer this. They can refer to the story text. If they get this question wrong, you'll hear that same audio feedback from Wordtastic that tells them they got the question wrong. And when they get the questions right, they will hear that same audio feedback as well. This 5th question is always going to be a short answer question. If your students struggle with typing, you could just have them type any character into this box and have them return later to answer this question orally for you instead.
Agilidad. Venenosa. Amenaza. Atacar.
And so some of these questions are just to move these events into the correct order. For the higher levels, they're going to have more questions. So it could be up to 9. For the lower levels, they may have as few as 5 questions. But they're always going to have the same question type in the same order.
Vuelva a contar o resuma la lectura en sus propias palabras. Haga clic en Revisar la lectura si quiere leer la lectura otra vez.
So you'll notice the story no longer shows up right next to the student-facing answer box. But they can still go back to review the story if they forget something or want to review a detail. It's just not right next to this text box, so the students aren't copying directly from the story.
Ahora está listo para aprobar. Lea la lectura y juegue Wordtastic hasta que su profesor venga para aprobarle en esta lectura.
So here again, you'll notice the bars at the top and bottom of the screen are red, so that is indicating the student is ready to work with you. In the meantime, they can practice the story again.
Haga clic en Iniciar grabación para grabarse leyendo la lectura. Haga clic en Terminado si termina de leer antes de que suene la campana. Si no desea grabarse, haga clic en Siguiente para continuar.
So this is an option that you could turn off if you don't want students to be able to record themselves. You might have this feature on if you are working remotely or you want to be able to score their hot timings later, or sometimes if you want the students to be able to hear themselves reading. Otherwise,
Juegue Wordtastic mientras espera a su profesor.
they can play
Haga
this
clic
waiting
en
game.
la mejor respuesta.
So you're going to log in with your teacher credentials as soon as you're ready to conduct their hot timing. You're going to start the timer when you hear them start to read, and this time you're not going to have them click on the words when there are errors or when they don't know them. Instead, you're going to just keep a mental note, keeping track of any words they stop, stumble, or skip on. If they are hesitating for more than 3 seconds, you can provide the word at that point and add it to your tally of words read incorrectly or the number of errors. And we're just going to wait again for that 1 minute. You'll notice over here that we have a few boxes. So this is where you're going to, at the end, input the number of errors. And then we also have an expression score. So the computer's keeping track of the overall rate, and it's going to use the errors also to determine that score. So it's not just the words read, it's words read correctly. And it's also important that the students are working on their expression. So your expectations for that may shift for them over time. You'll see when the timer stops, we have a little rubric here to help you guide.
Haga clic en la última palabra que leyó cuando sonó la campana.
So this can help you choose. Students do need at least a score of a 2 to be able to pass the story. And so it's always a good thing to kind of remind them that you are listening for expression. It's not just about how quickly they're reading. They should be reading accurately. If they have more than 3 errors, they will also not pass the story. So you can enter the number of errors here, and you'll see that this computer automatically calculates their words correct per minute score. You're going to enter their expression score, and then you can click next. You can see how much the student has improved since their cold timing and how much they scored in comparison to their goal or where you expected them to be at the end of this process here. Now you're going to be assessing any of their written responses. So we have this question 5. You can click to see possible answers, and you're going to choose whether the student got the question correct or incorrect. And then you're just going to, based on whatever your personal expectations are for the student, you're going to decide whether their retell met your expectations. Here you'll notice we have a lot of information about how the student's done throughout. I want to point out these tabs at the top of the screen. It's really nice to click through these with the student sitting there so that both of you can see how they've progressed over the past several stories. You can also see their comprehension graph here. So we're going to notice that this student is really struggling with main idea. So at this point, if they get a couple, or especially if there's 3 wrong, or you can kind of base it on this percentage over here at the right, we're going to need to provide some targeted instruction on the main idea question to help them learn how to answer that question a little better. And then this retell graph just counts the number of words. So that might just give you an idea of how thoroughly they're responding to that at the end of the process. So here again, you'll see that they got 2 of these questions wrong. If we scroll down, we'll see what they wrote for that prediction. We'll also see which questions they got wrong. We can click to review those questions with the student. If you need to see the correct answer, you can choose to view that. You can see any of the words that they clicked on and struggled with during the process. And you can, again, you can see that prediction here. So lots to review on this page. You can toggle this page between English and Spanish. So if you prefer to view this information in English, same thing for the graphs. They'll show up in English if you click this toggle. And then you're going to click next and assign any remedial actions. So typically anytime one of these has an X instead of a star, you're going to follow that along and click the toggle for the corresponding remedial action. You could also instead choose to pass with the current scores or just retest it. So typically you're going to click to have the student redo any missed questions, which would be the case. For the sake of time though, I'm just going to choose to pass with the current scores.
¡Felicitaciones! Aprobó esta lectura. Haga clic en Hecho para terminar.
So here's the end screen. You'll notice that the student gets blue ribbons when they get when they reach the maximum possible expectations for this. So if they had 0 errors, if they do well but don't reach the maximum, they might still get this gold medal, but without the ribbons. They'll click done.
Por favor, seleccione una lectura.
And you'll see that the story counter has incremented to 4. Again, this is motivating. You want them to be motivated to read as many stories as possible because the more practice they do, the more progress they'll make. And then they can just click to start a new story at this point, and you can move on to help the other students. So I'm going to move back over to my presentation here. Loading. So again, today we focused on Read Naturally Live Español, but you may choose to have students work in multiple programs. So especially if you're working in a dual language program or if you're working with Spanish speaking English learners, you might have your students working, for example, on Read Naturally Live and Read Naturally Live Español at the same time. Maybe for English, you'd rather have them work independently or work on phonics instead. And there are many ways that you might choose to structure a session to work on multiple programs. So for example, you might choose to have a student warm up in one of the English language programs for say 10 minutes before switching over to Read Naturally Live Español. Alternatively, you could divide your sessions evenly between 2 programs, or have students alternate between programs after each completed pass activity in either program. So that's kind of the big picture look at Read Naturally Live Español. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was informative and it will help you get a start in working with your students in this program.
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please respond to survey questions that will appear on your screen after the webinar so we can continue to improve the educational experience for all of you and our future webinars. And please follow us on your favorite social media platform. And just a reminder that we'll be sending out follow-up emails with links to the webinar recording and handout in about 24 hours. Please feel free to share the recording with your colleagues. Thank you so much and have a great day.